And I'm Father Michael Rossman, coming from Chicago. We're glad that you're able to join us for this little oasis in the middle of the day, a time to connect and enjoy one another's company.
We're thrilled to have Jesuit Father Joe Simmons coming to us from Oxford, England, as today's special guest. Father Joe, welcome to Jesuit Lunch Hour.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes. No, I'm sorry, I don't actually have a British accent. Thanks. It's nice to be with you guys. Yeah, it's great to be here with you. It's actually our tea time here, so this is Jesuit tea time hour. So very civilized over here.
When you're not drinking tea, what do you do in Oxford? Or maybe that's all you do. I don't know.
Well, I usually go for coffee myself. I'm working on a doctorate over here in theology and literature at the moment. I'm looking at writers who are sort of bothered by the question of religious belief, even if they themselves don't believe in God anymore. So I'm looking at folks like Virginia Woolf, wrote this lovely book, To the Lighthouse, and Julian Barnes, who's an English writer, who says, I don't believe in God, but I miss him. So I'm sort of curious to know who is it that you're missing, or what is it that you're missing? And how does that religious impulse continue even after we maybe formally move away from a religious commitment? So that's what I'm working on.
And Joe, perhaps you can tell us a bit about your background. Where did you grow up? What were some of the formative and perhaps humorous experiences, and what led you eventually to join the Society of Jesus?
Yes, thank you, Father Michael. Well, I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I went to Marquette University High School, the premier Jesuit high school of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I did not want to go there initially. I was signed up for beginning there against my will. I didn't want to go to an all-boys school. I was the only one from my grade school, Catholic grade school, who was going there. But it didn't take too long for me to really fall in love with the place. I had some exceptional Jesuit teachers and lay teachers as well who, for the Jesuits, it was interesting because it's like, I'm used to priests being up in the pulpit and seeing them at Mass on Sunday, but not really teaching or doing anything else. So that kind of opened my eyes to just a new way of thinking about priesthood. And I never really wanted to be a priest. I'm from a normal Catholic family, but that was not ever anything that was talked about or planned or hoped for. So. And then I went on a come and see weekend, a chance to go and kind of look at Jesuit life a little bit. It was actually an extended weekend that they don't do anymore, but it was an opportunity to see and meet some of the Jesuits who had taught me in high school and a few other Jesuits, younger Jesuits. And that was sort of an eye-opening experience for me. And then I went on to study at Marquette University, also in Milwaukee, and there I had more Jesuit teachers. And I was always impressed because you have these men who were thunder thinkers in the classroom, very sharp, but they never seemed to take themselves too seriously. But you could tell they took God seriously and the concerns and the spiritual lives of their students seriously. And then they'd have 10 p.m. student mass on campus. And so I was like, these guys kind of tick all the boxes as far as interest in the intellectual life, interest in the spiritual life, and interest in care of other people. So yeah, that was sort of my first real exposure to Jesuits, I think.
Great. And tell us about your experience as a Jesuit. So where did you do the different stages of formation, and what were some of the most formative parts of Jesuit formation?
Yeah, well, I joined what used to be called the Wisconsin province, and we cope with difficult situations like the time we find ourselves in by purchasing large amounts of cheese. So I have my this is a mature British cheddar, mature, and then Emmental slices. Anyways, like a Swiss cheese. So I joined the old Wisconsin province, and actually I had the pleasure of overlapping you with Father Rossman in the novitiate in St. Paul, Minnesota. So I began there in 2006. After I graduated college, I volunteered, taught for 2 years. I taught Spanish and Latin and helped with cross country and speech and debate and a lot of retreats and service trips. And then I joined in Minneapolis, St. Paul for 2 years. And then I studied philosophy at Loyola University, Chicago, again with Father Rossman. And that was a great experience of sort of wrestling with those deeper questions. And I went in really not interested in philosophy, which was probably a disappointment to my grandfather, who was a philosophy professor. And I think part of my issue was that I the questions weren't important to me yet. But sort of by the end of my 3 years there, the questions started touching on my lives. Question about, does God exist or not? If so, how does that influence and affect how we live? And if not, what is permitted? And so I think once those questions became live and interesting for me, that's when I kind of really got interested in philosophy and realizing the importance of clarity of thought and knowing how to dialogue with people, whatever background they might come from, whether they're believers or non-believers, sort of the ethical system framework that they're operating out of. So it was actually very helpful by the end of the experience, and to see that religious questions of religious, how do I know that God might exist, epistemology, as we say, that those things are related deeply with philosophy and with theology. So that was sort of the connection point for me. And then, as you might know, part of Jesuit formation is going and teaching. So I spent 2 years teaching at a Jesuit high school in Minneapolis, Cristo Rey, and I loved my time there. It was great. And I was also interested to see about the possibility of teaching university later on. And so I taught a year of philosophy at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska. Go Jays. And really had a wonderful time in both of those things. Obviously very different experiences, but for me, teaching philosophy, it was sort of the shoe was on the other foot then. I was responsible for making this interesting when I did not enjoy philosophy as an undergrad or even at the beginning of my philosophy studies in Jesuit formation. So I was trying to think, what are the questions that are important for, say, an 18-year-old? Questions about what is friendship, what is community, what is love, baby, don't hurt me, etc. And again, the question of, does God exist? How can we know? How do we deal with the question of theodicy, meaning why is there evil in the world? Why did bad things happen to good people? So I found that was sort of an interesting inroad to teaching, and it sparked for me a real desire to go on to pursue a doctorate, which is what I'm doing now. But then I studied theology again with Father Rossman. There's a pattern here. I think we might know each other.
Just can't get enough of you, Joe.
Studying theology in Boston, at Boston College, and really enjoying that. And that's when my interest sort of moved out even further into questions of theology and literature. To say, in a world where people might have skepticism around institutional religion and affiliation, we don't have the language to talk about religious experience, that literature that's done very well can kind of be an inroad into discussing questions of faith, an inroad in discussing questions of interiority and wrestling with doubt and everything that comes with that. So reading some really terrific literature by Marilynne Robinson, who's one of my favorite writers, poetry as well. And anyways, so that's sort of my interest. And then I was ordained in 2017, again with Father Rossman, in Milwaukee, and I worked at a Spanish-speaking parish in Chicago, St. Procopius, which was richly rewarding. And then I worked at Loyola Academy High School in Chicago. It seems like I can't hold down a job, but that's just part of our Jesuit formation. And then I began this doctorate here in Oxford, England in 2018. And I'm still pinching myself because I think I still feel like an imposter here, but most people do. So that's kind of where I'm at. I can go into any more detail of any of that, or leave it at that, whatever you'd like.
So outside of Father Joe, outside of the library and the classroom and away from your desk, if you had a perfect Saturday afternoon and you could spend it any way you wanted, how would you spend that day?
I think probably a late breakfast with some of my friends. Like just the other day, a bunch of my Jesuit buddies and I sat around late for breakfast. We don't have a lot of places to go these days, so you just make an extra pot of coffee. You sit around and tease each other. I like to both tease and to be teased. I have thick skin. And then after that, sitting and reading for a while, and then maybe go for a walk or a run. I enjoy running. I've run a few marathons, again, with Father Rossman. And so I like to get kind of I think, especially when most of my time is spent sitting and reading, to get out and get physical activity is important and valuable. And then we have lunch with the community, mass and lunch with the community on a Saturday. And then on Saturday evenings, I'll often either go out to get a bite to eat with some friends or cook something in here in community. Part of our formation is we're sort of trained to be able to cook from anywhere from 2 people to, well, 200's an exaggeration, but to make big meals for a lot of people. And so one of the unexpected joys, I think, of Jesuit formation is learning how to adapt and say, okay, well, you want to eat tonight? Well, put some food on. And usually have a pretty willing audience ready to try whatever. So that would be kind of an ideal Saturday, I think, for me.
Great. And Father Joe, so the Society of Jesus is all over the world. We're roughly 16,000 Jesuits, and you have the opportunity to, dive deeply into, another culture and another Jesuit culture at Oxford. What is one of the biggest differences about your time over there? Perhaps what is one of the quirks about British culture that just makes you laugh? What is your experience like in a different part of the Society of Jesus?
I think coming over here has made me appreciate, I like a dry sense of humor, and the humor here is so dry you need to put hand lotion on. It's very, very dry. And the Jesuits here, there's some lovely, lovely men who don't take themselves too seriously. It's also interesting because in the States, we have this history of sort of the American Catholic experience as one of immigrants coming over and sort of moving up socioeconomically all over the Midwest, like in my hometown in Milwaukee, or, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Chicago, St. Louis, Detroit, et cetera. So the experience here, though, is of a country that has historically been Catholic and Christian for a very long time, and then that was made illegal. And so you have all these Catholic families that are so-called recusants. They never gave up the faith under persecution. And when Catholicism was made legal again, the emancipation in, I think it was 1830 here in England, thereabouts, the Jesuits who are here now were the ones responsible for basically starting the Catholic Church again. It had been operating kind of underground for a long time, getting it started again and telling this kind of deep history of these great Catholic martyrs, Nicholas Owen, Edmund Campion, after whom my community is named. Just a tremendous Jesuits who lived basically in fear of death, and many of them were killed for being Catholic priests. So there's a very different history of Catholicism in this country, and people are proudly Catholic, those who are practicing Catholic. So that's sort of an interesting experience, too, to have that rich patrimony. I was saying Mass at Stonyhurst, which is an exceptional Jesuit boarding school, the oldest continuously running Jesuit school in the world. And it was a Mass for the day when we had, I think, 15 of their alumni are martyrs. They were killed for their faith. I don't think there were quite as many martyrs at Marquette High School where I attended, but there's just the sense of depth and history and kind of heroic lives that people have laid down here. I must say I do miss garlic. Garlic is not a common ingredient in English cooking. When I got a little garlic clove, it felt like I had contraband or like. So that would be one thing I kind of miss from the States. That and Mexican food. I love Mexican food, and that no se encuentra here. So yeah, that's what I got. I'm also actually enjoying this sunshine here. The sun is known to come out at least once a month, and today seems to be our day. So actually the spring in England is quite beautiful. So I'm grateful for the sunshine today too. You get these small graces along the way. Try to savor them when you can find them,
Father Joe, how about commonalities? Like all the places you've encountered Jesuits, what are the things that you've come to expect to find when you go into a new Jesuit community, or when you meet a new Jesuit, or when you enter a Jesuit work?
Yeah, that's a great question, Father Bell. I think that the first thing would be there's a common language and experience, which is the experience of doing the 30-day exercises, the spiritual exercises of Ignatius Loyola. And so Jesuits can speak easily and openly about their religious experience of saying, I had a deep encounter with Christ, and it doesn't sound kind of fake or strange because we all kind of know what it's like. So the facility, the ease of speaking about one's interiority, I've come to really appreciate, and that's something that you find from Jesuits around the world. Another commonality, I think, is just a genuine, like when you go to visit friends and you don't have to kind of like go through formalities like, oh, hello, nice to meet. Like there's a sense of your home, even though it's a new community, a new place, that anywhere you go, there's, because of that shared experience and formation, that you're home. this is it's not a family in the traditional nuclear family sense, but it is in a very real. There's a fraternal love and family love that you find across cultures, across countries. I mean, I live with Jesuits from Colombia, India, Ohio. It's crazy. There's a lot of English Jesuits, Irish Jesuits. We have a Jesuit from Malaysia as well.
Good.
Oh, Father Joe, it looks like we're your internet's getting a little spotty. Thank you so much for taking time for us today, Father Joe. What a great and interesting experience you're having, and thanks for sharing it with us.
And now that you're frozen, we can talk about you, and you can't respond.
And thanks to everybody there on Facebook Live for joining us today for Jesuit Lunch Hour, powered by beajesuit.org. Oh, Father Joe, welcome back.
Okay. I was I was plugged into the wall, and nothing seemed to change. Anyways, what was the last thing you heard me say? Something familiar.
It was really profound.
Whatever it was really profound.
I couldn't even call it to mind. So, my name is Father Joe, and then whoop.
We just want to thank you so much for being our guest today. Absolute delight talking to you. Thanks for sharing your life and your insights with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's a delight to see you guys in these strange days. But, we use technology any way to communicate. I think it was Peter Canisius who was going around Germany, and Ignatius said to him, find the best way to communicate, meaning get the best printing press you can do. So I think that's what Be Live TV is for us these days when we can't move too much outside. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, all right. So thanks everybody for watching. Again, I'm Father Michael Rossman, joined by Father Bill Murphy, and today we had the pleasure of talking with Father Joe Simmons. We hope to see you again for our next installment of Jesuit Lunch Hour, powered by beajesuit.org. We'll be doing this on weekdays at 11:30 Central Time, 12:30 Eastern Time. Hope to see you again soon. God bless.
Right. God bless. See you later.